In the Middle Ages, living conditions varied greatly depending on social status and location, but there were common characteristics, especially when it came to hygiene and bathing.
Erster Everyday Life.
People lived in wooden or stone houses, often without windows, making homes dark and damp. The middle class, craftsmen, peasants, lived in small homes with simple interiors, while nobles and aristocrats lived in castles or manor houses with many rooms and luxurious decorations. Peasants typically worked the land and had limited access to amenities. 2. Hygiene and bathing. Bathing was not as frequent as it is today. People bathed much less often in the Middle Ages than in antiquity, mainly due to the lack of convenient sanitation, fears of illness, and a general lack of knowledge about hygiene. Public baths, thermae, existed in Europe, but after the fall of the Roman Empire, their popularity declined. By the 14th and 15th centuries, they were still present in some cities but were associated with certain social classes. However, these public baths were also places where diseases could spread. Home baths were rare, and people typically used a bucket of warm water to wash their bodies. In cold weather, people often preferred to wash partially, just using cloths and water to clean their faces and hands. 3. Hygiene practices. In the Middle Ages, people used herbs and aromatic oils to cleanse their skin instead of soap. Soap, in its modern form, became popular only toward the end of the Middle Ages. Wealthy households often had servants who helped with personal hygiene tasks, including washing and grooming. Teeth were cleaned using various pastes and powders, usually made from ashes, sand, or charcoal. One common technique was chewing specific herbs.
Vierte Religion and Public Perceptions.
The church played a role in shaping attitudes toward hygiene. Some religious leaders believed that frequent bathing could lead to sinful thoughts and advised people to avoid excessive pleasures. However, there were also religious rituals that required purification, such as baptisms and other cleansing ceremonies. 5. Medieval diseases and their impact on hygiene. During the plague epidemics of the 14th century, many people stopped going to baths, fearing that the water could spread disease. This further contributed to the decline of public bathing practices. In conclusion, hygiene and bathing in the Middle Ages were much less frequent and less organized than today. People engaged in some basic washing and cleansing practices, but the conditions and limited resources, as well as the fear of spreading diseases, led to minimal personal hygiene routines. In the Middle Ages, the living conditions of people were significantly influenced by their social status, the region they lived in, and the era in question. The concept of hygiene and bathing was quite different from modern-day practices, and much of it was rooted in cultural beliefs, religious influence, and the availability of resources. Hygiene and bathing practices. Peasants and lower classes generally had very limited access to proper bathing facilities. Most of them lived in small, overcrowded houses with basic amenities. Bathing was not a daily ritual, and many people only bathed a few times a year, often in rivers or lakes. Nobles and wealthier individuals had more access to bathhouses or private baths in their homes. They often enjoyed regular bathing as part of their daily routine, although the water was typically reused by multiple people. This practice was more common in cities and larger towns. Public bathhouses were prevalent, especially in larger towns and cities. However, these were sometimes seen with suspicion by the church, which believed that they could be morally corrupt places where lewd activities took place. Despite this, bathhouses continued to exist, and many people from different social classes visited them. In some monasteries, cleanliness was highly valued, and monks would follow regular cleansing routines. Monasteries often had rudimentary bathing facilities and would make use of herbs and oils for their daily cleaning.
Bathing Rituals.
Hot water was a luxury. People used herbal infusions and oils to scent the water, and sometimes they would soak in it as a form of therapy. Lack of privacy meant that communal bathing was common, with many people bathing in the same water. This was a communal experience, often done in large stone or wooden tubs. Skin care products were made from natural ingredients like olive oil, honey, and vinegar. These products were used to maintain the skin and clean the body. Religious influence on hygiene. Religion played a major role in medieval hygiene practices. The Catholic Church had a significant influence on how people perceived cleanliness. While spiritual purity was a priority, the physical cleanliness of the body was often seen as secondary. Bathing was sometimes considered sinful, as it was associated with indulgence and vanity. In the later Middle Ages, particularly during the Black Death, there was a shift toward prioritizing cleanliness in an effort to combat disease. However, it was also believed that water could carry disease, so people were more hesitant to bathe.
Living conditions.
Living in castles or manor houses was vastly different from living in small cottages. Castles had larger, well-lit rooms, and the wealthy had access to better amenities, including fireplaces, private bathing areas, and more extensive food and water supplies. Poorer people lived in cramped, poorly ventilated homes, often with dirt floors and only basic furnishings like straw mattresses and simple wooden furniture. In conclusion, hygiene and living conditions in the Middle Ages were highly variable. The wealthy had access to better sanitation, while the poor had to make do with rudimentary means. Despite the frequent lack of proper bathing facilities, people found ways to stay clean using what was available to them, and bathing rituals were deeply connected to religious and cultural beliefs.